This is how much I want from a $5,000 game jam. If you're here for that, well, then goodbye. But if you want to know how I won this, despite no prizes with this amount, stick around till the end and let's get started. It all began on a random afternoon when I was scrolling through upcoming game jams on itch.io and this title caught my eye. Naturally, I clicked on it and I assumed that there would be a huge number of participants, like over 1,000, for this kind of prize money, but to my surprise, there were only about 260 entries at the time, which made me think there might be some kind of plot twist to the jam, due to which game devs were not taking part. But after going through the details, which were as follows: a 10-day game jam from 24th November to 4th December on the theme of rivalry, along with an additional rule to avoid early starts. The game must be a WebGL game. Everything seemed normal. I then had a look at the host, who go by Biga Arcade, which is a Web3 play to earn gaming platform currently in public alpha. Now, if you look at the title closely, you notice that there is a V2 in there, which means that this is their second game jam. Wanting to see how they do things, I looked up the first one, and turns out that that was a $5,000 game jam as well.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
Since 5,000 was the total prize pool, the actual distribution of prizes were as follows: $3,000 for the first place, second place got $1,250, and $500 for the third, along with a hidden gem category. The prizes were further boostable with significant social engagement, which you should keep in mind, as this metric was an important part of my experience in the jam. At this point, it was a no brainer to hop in the competition and test out my game dev skills. 24 hours before the start, the additional rule was revealed, which was that the game must have an unplayable companion. And that was pretty much the extra rule. We had full creative control on how much this companion would impact our game and whether this companion would be a friend, enemy, or anything else really. Thus began day 0. 0 because the game jam had not officially started yet, but as the additional rule was revealed, the first phase of any game jam was in effect, which is the ideation phase. And my way of ideating is to heavily brainstorm all the rough ideas and mechanics first, write them down in one place, and then filter through them or mix and match them to find the best combination. That's how I like to refine my game ideas. So, day 0 was basically letting my brain run wild with ideas, even using ChatGPT as a second brain to generate some interesting mechanics and writing them down. Also, as a side note, I won't be explaining the idea boards in high detail, so feel free to pause if you wish to look at them in depth. With 24th of November here, day 1 had begun, and according to my roadmap, I had to finalize the idea today. After a lot of bouncing around the different mechanics and ideas, I landed on a top down infinite wave twin stick shooter, which was heavily inspired by Black Ops 2 Zombies survival game mode. I wanted to recapture that feeling of shooting hordes of zombies and getting stronger in my own way. As you can see that there are two variations even in the final idea, but there wasn't much competition between these and decided to work on the first one. I made a simple progress board to keep track of different tasks and to-dos, but if you know anything about game dev, you'll know that this progress board will look totally different by the end of the jam. Here's a sneak peek at the final day's board. So stick around to see how the journey unfolds because it was time to get into dev mode. Day 2 started with a getting as much done as possible mindset, which is a very good recipe for burnout, but unfortunately, no matter how hard I try to avoid burnout during a game jam, I always end up the same. By the end of the day, I was able to complete the player movement system, guns pickup system, and a very bare bones shooting system as well. For the player and gun models, I use this Toon Shooter Game Kit asset pack by Quaternius. Here is the end of the day progress board. Day three's focus was entirely on the shooting system. Since I had multiple guns, I had to work out the different values and attributes depending on the gun, along with other things such as the bullet models and more. It definitely was a slow day. Day 4 was another slow day with the shooting system still not completed, but it was mainly due to the player animations. You see, I hate working on animations because they're very time consuming, and something I learned the hard way that day was that in twin stick shooters, the player's body and legs animation work independently, which further adds to the time it would take to complete the set of player animations. However, I decided that it was not worth the time to have independent animations, so I went with an all direction walking animation, which kinda looks weird right now, but is almost unnoticeable later on and blends in surprisingly much better than I thought. I still wasn't very happy by the progress made on day 4. It was day 5 already, and that meant the jam was almost halfway done. And seeing other people's progress made me realize how far behind schedule I really am, and that hit hard. I decided to put a hold on the shooting system and start building the world map at this stage. Now, if you looked at the final idea board closely, you may have noticed that I had written Attack on Titan style world, but somewhere in between development, I decided against that and followed the path of Black Ops 2 zombie style map. The way these maps are built is that they have 5 to 6 main locations, all connected via multiple routes. This was the first iteration of my world map, which shows some main locations. Then this was the second, which shows all of the locations connected to each other, and this was the final iteration of my game's world map. For the models, I found this really nice asset pack that completely matched the post-apocalyptic look and low poly style that I was going for. Here are some screenshots that show how the world map design was translating from paper to the actual map in the game. Building the world map continued on day 6 as well because I greatly underestimated the time it would take to build the map. As a consequence of that, at the end of the day, I had to reassign and reorganize the remaining tasks so I could finish them all in time. Finally, on day 7, the world map was fully complete along with the atmosphere. I was also able to complete the enemy AI, point system, and a health/damage system. I was finally starting to make good progress, but I was far from completing the project with over 50% of the functionality still remaining to be implemented. Before I knew it, day 8 was already here, and at this point I had to start cancelling some of the planned features if I wanted to finish the game. But I didn't entirely rule them out because I was able to complete most of the functionality tasks by the end of the day. On day 9, things got a bit interesting because while I was trying to get the basics of the game in place, I forgot one of the most important aspects of the jam, which was the additional rule of the companion. I realized I had to put the companion system in place as soon as possible, or my game would automatically be ineligible for submission. Now, this wouldn't be a 2024 YouTube video without AI. So, to save time on the companion model, I decided to try a text to 3D model generator by Luma AI. After playing around it, I realized I could make it work, and after a lot of trial and error, I was able to get this 3D model out of it. But before I imported this to Unity, I had to optimize it in Blender as it had a very high number of vertices. After optimizing the mesh, I coded the companion system, which is basically the player summoning the Titan as their companion when things get rough. Simple as that. I was also able to work on some small improvements and tweaks here and there. Starting the final day, I coded in the leaderboard, which would fulfill the rivalry criteria of the jam by making players compete for the first place with their high scores. With a few hours to go, I only had to add in some sound effects and music, but I was way too burned out by now, so I decided not to add any sound or music and submitted the game. Right about this time, we were given a 12-hour extension to submit our project as WebGL builds usually tend to have some issues. It's a very common thing that happens in game jams, much more than you would think. But by this time, I had basically convinced myself that sound design really wasn't too important, which heavily backfired later on. So, with that, it was the end of my dev journey. The jam ended with about 300 plus participants and 65 submissions. It was now the rating period for the next 2 weeks, and over the upcoming days, I was able to rate and give feedback to all of the games. My score was absolutely smashed out of the park by some hardcore players, and in a way that felt really nice to see. As I mentioned earlier, that I ditched the sound effects and music, well, guess what? A lot of the feedback that I got on my game was regarding no sound effects and how it would have really added to the game. 2 weeks went by pretty quick, and it was finally time for the results. Now, for the moment we've all been waiting for. And my game didn't win anything. But that was not the final winner's announcement. You see, the game that placed second was disqualified due to plagiarism. The original game was made in 2020 and someone scraped it from itch and submitted it as their own. So with this twist, the prize money of 1250 was up again, and the bigger team said that they would redistribute it to other deserving games with not much else on how exactly the prize would be distributed. After about a day, the second winner's announcement was here, and in my opinion, the redistribution was really well done by the bigger team because it gave recognition to a larger number of games, rightly so. And this time, I also won a prize of $200 in the social engagement category, as during the jam I was posting regular daily updates on Twitter or X, although it's still Twitter for me, being very active on Discord, and although all this happened in December, I guess this video is also a part of that now. Anyhow, I would suggest you all to give these winning games a play as they have very unique and fun mechanics. Before ending, I just want to say that if you're a game dev and you'd like to be updated on these kind of money prized game jams in the future, then do follow me on Twitter as that's where I am most active and post these kind of things. Thank you for watching and congratulations to all the winners of the Biga Jam once again.